tonight, this is going to be for the 9th.
All right, so what do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4. You are appointed.
Thank you.
Hello again.
Hello?
We'll wait till David's back. Okay, so I think these are 2 areas here. This canoe shape.
That's a lenticular. You see it over mountains, you know, the spatial.
Okay.
It looks like an elephant inside a snake. You've read The Little Prince?
All right, so, shall we begin?
Sure.
Want to give a little overview, or would you like me
I can do that. So, we are here tonight on behalf of Crossroads Academy, and it will not be the first time you guys will be seeing us this spring, because this is the next thing, which tonight's meeting is really a precursor to that, but I think you guys know from our lot line adjustment application last year that this is all part of a major effort by the school to replace its existing middle school building and reconfigure its campus in a more organized way. So this, what's coming next, is sort of the end of that process, hopefully. But as part of that, for tonight, one of the things that the school wants to do is to reconfigure and improve the driveway system. Just partly related to this new building, but also just so that the driveway is better organized than exists today. And what exists today is really, a reflection of the fact that the school property used to be 2 separate properties, which recently were merged together as a result of the lot line adjustment that you all approved a year ago. And so for this application, tonight's discussion relates to a special exception application that the zoning board will hear next week. But there are proposed impacts to the Wetlands Conservation District, which we met with the Conservation Commission last week, and they went through those impacts, and tonight is 2 areas where there are proposed impacts to the steep slopes, all related to sort of the reconfiguring of the driveway plan. And Rod from Pathways Consulting can give more details if there are questions about the specifics of the steep slopes impacts, but if there are general questions about what the school is trying to do or about the driveway system, I can talk about that. And I can also just mention, because if it hasn't come up, it will, which is when we were going through the lot line adjustment a year ago, David discovered the existence of a conservation easement which impacts a portion of the Crossroads campus, and we have been in discussions with the select board for several months now in an effort to figure out a way to resolve that, which I can say that I think the school believes we have resolved that, and we're in the process of documenting it to the select board's satisfaction, but Kevin can also give his perspective on that. But that's happening as we speak, and so the school would expect that any land use approvals by the zoning board, the planning board, the conservation commission may be conditioned on satisfactory resolution of the easement situation with the select board and with the town. So that's just background, and I'm happy to go into
I think really we're looking at a pretty narrow thing tonight. We're just looking at the steep slopes.
Yeah.
Right.
Our role is advisory.
Mhm.
So I would advise that we look at this, the steep slopes narrowly.
Sure.
And most of what you're talking about
It's in
probably
April.
be more relevant. I mean, it's nice to have the background,
Right.
and I appreciate it, but it'd probably be more relevant to the zoning board unless anybody.
Site plan review when it comes up.
Yeah,
April
well,
9th.
well,
April 9th.
April 9th, we'll be here for this full site
Okay,
plan.
but your next step is us or the?
Zoning board next week.
Yeah, so that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. When you go to the zoning board for this,
Mhm.
the special exception, they'll
Right.
probably be interested in some of the background that you.
Sure.
Especially since they were the ones that wanted the easement originally.
Right.
So,
Yeah, please.
I just had a question. Just the overall, it looks like you're putting a path, a walking path from the parking lot, right? The
Mhm.
existing parking lot
That's right.
across this steep slope.
That's correct.
Right.
And
I
then,
can-
and then this one, is this the red here, is that asphalt? That'll be asphalt or gravel? And that's
The red
in
is asphalt, right?
Yeah, and that'll be in the steep slope. So it's those
Right.
two
Yeah.
spots, right?
Yeah, let me just give you a quick explanation of what you're looking at. I have a little one here, and you have a big one.
Do you want a larger one? I have another.
No, it's no problem. So of course, Route 10's out, down low here. The existing access is right here. And it comes into the Clee building, which is this building here. It's the Clee building. This is the classroom building that we're replacing right here. The gray is the new school. And then this is Bancroft, which is the auditorium building. And so the existing driveway comes into the Clee parking lot, and then there's a second driveway that comes down, and this location ties into this loop road. And so this is the intersection that's never been completed to Route 10. And David just asked why, I think, or
Yep.
somebody did. And so back in 2004, 2005, when we were in for site plan review, there was a stipulation where we needed to build a turning lane on Route 10, and the school could not afford it. And so we kept the existing entrance and never opened up the new entrance. And now, 15 years later, we have a bunch of data. We have 2 traffic studies, actually. We shared those traffic studies with the DOT. The DOT agreed that a turning lane is not warranted, and they issued a permit to open up this driveway. So we have that permit to open up the driveway, so the new road will be this existing driveway, a connection over to the Clee parking lot. And then with the school sitting there and the way it's been laid out, if you're familiar with the site, when you drive in the existing entrance with the existing Crossroads school sign is right here, sits up on the hill, if you can picture it, and this is a big knob of, goes up and back down, goes up from Route 10 and then back down towards the campus. And to get this turnaround in front of the Fanger Center, which is the name of the new school, it requires us to grade up on that hill. And that hill meets the requirement for steep slopes with a 20-foot rise over a 100-foot horizontal distance. And that top of the hill is greater than 20 feet. I don't think we'll be grading all the way up on that hill. I think we're gonna be hitting ledge. And so that'll turn into a ledge face eventually, but on the plan here, we show it graded off a slope. And so this green area here, which is the elephant and the snake, is the steep slope area. And then on the other side, this blue area is a jurisdictional wetland. It's coming from the Pond View Pond across the street through culvert, a little wetland here under a culvert, into a wetland here, and then off to the greater wetland complex to the north of the site. And so this wetland has a buffer, a wetland buffer, which is this dashed line out here and out here. And that's commented on by the Conservation Commission. And outside that wetland buffer, this little area out here it's a combination of steep slopes and wetland buffer. So we're here for the path connecting the upper parking lot down to the Fanger Center, and then this hill adjacent to the existing access. So narrowly speaking, that's what we're here for, is the work required on that steep slope area.
And then just one little piece of context, more broadly speaking, when the site plan review comes to your attention in April, one of the things the school is hoping to do as part of that is to improve safety and separation between pedestrian and vehicular traffic. And so what this proposed gravel path that does go through a steep slope conservation district would do is allow people who will park in that existing parking lot that's up near Route 10 to be able to walk down to the new building and not be walking on the driveway, which has guardrails on either side of it. So, you know, the sense is if you're a faculty member walking into the building and there's cars going by both sides of you and you're kind of pinched in by the guardrails, it would be safer for pedestrians to be able to have a gravel path outside the guardrails. But in order to do that, it creates impacts in both the wetland and steep slope conservation district, which is why we are here this evening.
So can I ask a question? Why then do you dump the faculty member off into the driveway and not give them an adequate crossing to hook up with the other sidewalk?
Well, that, you mean a painted crossing or a traditional crosswalk?
Just anything, except you leave them in the middle of the road.
Well, it's an angled crosswalk, just due to the slopes, but it is intended
So
from the
it's-
end of that gravel drive to the start of the concrete sidewalk. That is where they're crossing.
Yeah, but you've got them going on a hill, and they're not coming in to have the shortest crossing space there.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be wrong with trying
We
to
could- we
align
could-
that so
we could
that it
extend
would
that.
be actually safe? And there might actually be this one would, the other sidewalk would come out to try to meet it, and, most crossings have, kind of bump outs, so that there's to minimize the distance for the pedestrian. And I don't know if that creates more steep slope or wetland, but, it makes no sense to me to have this dumping somebody and, it's not just people, it's kids, out into a road like that.
Yeah, so Vicky, you're saying they have to walk
They
diagonally across
diagonally,
their road?
yeah, across not just
Instead
one,
of-
but actually two kind of roadways without adequate crossing, and that's not how you do intersections for pedestrians if you want them to be safe. And especially it's on a hill, and, so I think this design, even though this is very schematic, we don't have any detail at all, needs to be changed, and it may be that there's more disturbance because of it, but it makes no sense to, approve something that needs to be changed, because it's not safe. So this should either come down to, at least to where the pole is, to minimize the distance that the pedestrian has to walk, and this radius needs to be changed, to have a bump out or something, so that the people, to minimize that distance. I don't see another way to get the pedestrian safely to, and this is the only other sidewalk that's anywhere near, so that's, and, you need to make that a nice way so that they don't try to cut across here, make it so that that's where they will walk.
Well, yeah, if they're walking to the new building, and they're gonna
Well,
want to.
this is the way you get from this parking lot all the way over to here, so you've got sidewalk, that would allow you to be actually separated from the traffic, which I think is their intent.
So what are your thoughts on that?
It's a good idea.
Okay. So how does that impact how would that impact what we're really considering here in terms of the steep slopes? Not at all.
I think it does, it might
Minor.
more wetland.
Excuse me?
Just a minor,
Okay.
very minor impact. There's no wetland impact, it's just, there's a buffer impact and there's a steep slope up by the
Okay.
parking lot. Just minor.
Any other points, questions?
So this ledge will be blasted,
Or hammered.
and what are you gonna do to make sure that the people who live close to that, you know, whose foundations might be attached to that ledge aren't gonna like blame you for cracks in their basements.
So it's a means and methods with the contractor. However, if they choose to blast, then there'll be a pre-blast survey conducted within a probably quarter mile. So the condos would have a video done on the basements and whatnot.
So, Rod, that looks like it's about 25 feet wide, is that right?
What's that?
The area that you're gonna, the red part.
Oh, the red part, yeah, the width of that road is 20 feet, so it's about 18 feet wide.
Yeah, that you'll have to
At
cut in
the
there.
widest part, and then there'll be a ditch line, and then
Yep.
right up the hill, which will probably turn into more of a ledge face.
Right.
And then in this plan, the old middle school building goes away,
Yes.
and what's gonna go there?
Nothing, it's gonna be open
Grass.
green space.
And will you have handrails for the path?
We do not have handrails on that path, no. It's 8%.
Okay. And do you have a light fixture
We
selected?
do, we have those little black circles with the stars.
Ours.
So there's 4 lights along the
Yeah,
path.
do you have the fixture selected?
And we do, it's in that set, but
Okay.
we have a whole landscape and lighting plan, but that's for April 9th.
So when you look at how the width of the excavation for this, you know, it's because you're obviously doing conduit plus is that how you figure out the disturbance? And, like, this is, you've got it all regraded.
It looks like a major disturbance, but if you look at it in cross-section, you
Mhm.
have a hill now,
Mhm.
and now you have a little path and a hill, and you're just catching up.
Mhm.
So it's not like a major earthwork, it's just a few feet on top of the existing slope, if you follow me.
Okay,
Let's
but the
build
width,
up.
I guess, is the way you have these, are the lights actually located where you show them to be? Is it-
Yes.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
because they're a couple of feet off the,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
okay.
So you're gonna build it up, right, not dig into it, you're just
Well,
build it.
we're gonna bench it in,
Yeah.
and we wanna have a little bit of a drainage ditch on the uphill side. And so we're gonna bench it in and a small cut there and then a small fill on the front side.
And so, and I forget, what, is the path gonna be paved?
It's gonna be hard packed, so crushed stone.
Yeah. So you wouldn't be using any de-icing?
No,
Not-
no, it'll just be snow blown and probably some sand.
Okay?
Yep.
So, we have to give the zoning board input. That's our role here. So what do people suggest?
I just had another question, so this building can't be pushed any further to the west because of
Which building?
the new building, the Fanger building?
It's positioned where it's proposed to be, in order to serve several purposes. One is to try to balance the campus out a bit, because the existing campus is sort of heavily skewed towards the Klee building and the condominium, and it
Yeah.
leaves the Bancroft building sort of isolated and stranded, and so one objective is to make the new building sort of a central portion of the campus. Another is, to the west of where the building is located, we want to create as much open green pedestrian space as possible to sort of create, not a quadrangle, but a triangle, sort of with the hypotenuse being Hughes Brook, and the two sides being the length between Klee and the new building in Bancroft, so that we really want to have sort of an open campus so that people can walk between the buildings without having to go through parking lots or any place where there's vehicles. And so we're trying to position the building as far east as possible in order to accomplish that, and also tie in with the whole existing grades and where there are conservation districts. So it's, where it is proposed in that plan, tries to accomplish as many of those things as possible with what the existing slope of the land is. And
Okay, so what I'm trying to do in my head is make up a story as to why this could be pushed west to avoid the steep slope impacts on the lenticular or the elephant or whatever that one's called.
Yeah.
So is there, I mean, is it solely the design, or do you have like a wetland setback here?
There's a wetland setback and there's a shoreline setback too. The building doesn't necessarily bump up against that.
So
I don't-
that line is not marked here, is that where the wetland setback is?
Yes, that is
Okay.
wetland setback, yes.
Which, that dotted line?
The dotted line
The dash
actually
li- the dash
goes
line.
through the Clee building.
Right. Okay, so it's mainly
So one
your
thing we're
design.
anticipating is this ledge cut, and so we don't feel that that disturbance out in that front mound is going to be as big as it's graded. Because
Mhm.
we've done soil probes out there and we have ledge at, either at surface or just
Mhm.
below the surface there, so that's gonna be much less disturbance, and so that allows us to move the building towards the east.
Mhm.
As you move the building, if you move the building back towards the west, of course, you'd have to extend some of the driveways and whatnot to that lower area, to the mechanical spaces and whatnot.
Mhm.
And it would also push the generator and the air conditioning unit for the IT room further west and so on and so forth.
Well,
also specifically to your question,
Yeah, I'm trying to make up a story to tell the zoning board about why this is a great idea to have it there and to force this. I mean, I think you thought, I haven't thought all about your circulation plan for the vehicle at all. If the building were like that, I mean, it would preserve the same circulation plan and you wouldn't have that impact. And so I'm trying to develop a story in my head, and so what you're telling me isn't helping me with that.
so as part of our application to the zoning board,
Mhm.
we have to address Article 10, I believe it is, which is
Yep,
special exception, and there are 14 different
right,
pieces, and we provided written.
I read that, but
Right,
it
so I
didn't
mean,
really
so we
tell me
have,
why you
like,
have
so
to
that's,
just.
I think the zoning board is gonna have to think about our application and whether,
Mhm.
whether it thinks that we address those 14 points or not. I mean,
Mhm.
it's not I don't believe it is a requirement that, like it would be for a variance, that we cannot locate, the proposed impact anywhere else. That would be a variance, this is a special exception, and so I think the zoning board's gonna have to look at this and make its own determination. But, this isn't a factor to your question, but it is a factor for the school, which is,
Mhm.
it does have impacts for the school to move that to the west, both from reducing the amount of open space and playing field area,
Mhm.
as also it starts to impact cost, because as you move the whole building, including the lower level, which involves excavation and foundations and stuff, there's real impact on what it will cost the school to build this building if we move it elsewhere. It's positioned to try and fit into the natural slope of the existing grades, and so monkeying around with that, is it possible? Sure, but it will cost, a lot of money to do that, and so that's one of many reasons why we proposed to put this building in that location.
Mhm.
And I think, Rod could probably say more about this, but also more specifically, like where this little drop-off loop is built
Mhm.
off the existing driveway to nowhere, we didn't want to do massive cuts and fills to do that little loop. And so, yes, there's a cut up on the back of the elephant or whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
but if we moved the whole driveway thing further to the west, there would be more cuts and elsewhere, so the impact might not be as much right in that spot, there would be bigger excavation and stuff that would be in the wetlands conservation district. So it's a bit of a balancing between which conservation district, you know, do we want to impact? And I think we tried to come up with a plan that overall has the least impact on all the conservation districts.
So, are we ready to provide comments about the steep slope for the zoning board?
Well, okay, one thing I would say is that, you know, had the building been located in a different location, this one might not be necessary. However, I don't think that, you know, if it truly is ledge, that we're going to have a problem with erosion. So, you know, kind of the impact, I don't think is gonna be that great, and the school has to look at it if it doesn't revegetate, or, you know, maybe they wanna see, you know, like a rock face. I don't know what the aesthetic, I mean, it's supposed to be,
But is
that's-
that what you wanna communicate to the zoning board?
That, I mean, that's my comment there, and this one, I think that, you know, the impact, given the safety consideration, is worthwhile, but I want this to actually be a safe crossing area, so I think it needs to be laid out in a different way, so that it joins up with this sidewalk here and minimizes the distance that a pedestrian would have to travel in the road. So, you know, there's a good reason for this one. This one sounds like, you know, I don't really know what all the design problems are associated with this, and, but this one is like a public health and safety thing. This one, I was trying to say, oh, we're protecting this wetland buffer or something like that, but I can't, you know, I can't say that. So those would be like the three things I would say to them.
Which are what? Because I want David to be
One-
able to.
Okay.
Yeah, no, yeah, I got two, but I didn't get the third.
Okay, the third one is this, is that this is.
What were let's just go through the
Okay.
three so that David has a clear idea.
This impact might have been avoidable if the building was located, you know, to the west. But I don't think that it's going to be a bad cut because of the nature of the ledge. It should not be erodible, and the aesthetics are only going to affect the school community because it's not a public rock face or slope that's, you know, however they finish it off, it's not gonna bother the public, traveling
All
public.
right, so that's one.
No, that's actually two.
Oh, that's two.
Yeah, and
Okay.
then this, I think that the impact to the steep slope, you know, is being done with good reason for pedestrian safety, but that it needs some redesign so that it provides better pedestrian access to this proposed sidewalk.
So you
So
got that?
that's just
Okay, so-
that's what I would say.
Okay, well, just so we got that down. Any other comments?
No, I agree with Mickey, I can't say anything else.
All right, so,
My only concern on this, if the ledge and the slope and the road would be icing. That often when you cut into ledge, you get seepage and icing, and you may have a drainage issue there that you have to deal with that whole road. I mean, you'd have it even if you moved it west, because it's coming down that hill. But once you cut into it, you might have a more unique icing problem. So just something to think about. I don't know whether that affects.
We do have a drainage ditch graded in along that side of the driveway, and we also have two catch basins or drop inlets in that ditch line. So-
Okay, so you've got a way to move the water out of there, but
Yeah.
you still may end up having.
So what's the outlet, where's the outlet for all your drainage system?
It's beyond the maintenance facility, it's off this plan, so we've designed, the stormwater system back in 2005 was designed for Bancroft Middle School, and
Lower school.
and a lower school. So we had 3 buildings approved.
Mhm,
Only 1 building was built,
mhm.
but the whole drainage system for those 3 buildings was constructed back in 2005.
Mhm.
And so this proposed project, once you get rid of the classroom and add the Fanger building, we're feeding it to the existing stormwater facilities on site.
And what's that?
Other grass treatment swales, and we're in the process of repairing one right now,
Mhm.
which had some damage due to one of the big storms. But that's what they are, down that location. And beyond our stormwater system is the proposed easement that Phil was talking about, protecting the larger wetland complex out farther north.
Mhm. So it's treatment swales and then a pipe to the wetlands?
Yes. Yeah.
So, David, are you satisfied, do you want that information to go to the ZBA, or are you satisfied with how?
Well, I'm just trying to see if there's any criteria where that affects anything. It doesn't appear to. I don't know if there's anything where they use stormwater or drainage or anything, but I guess it's more a practical thing from your perspective.
Well, I mean, if you want that comment to go to them, that's our role here. You're free to suggest.
Yeah, I
that.
don't know how to, I don't know if there's any remediation for it. It's just a caution. I mean, it's just a heads up that, you know, we all do things and we forget about what might happen in the winter,
Okay.
no matter how long we've lived here.
So, does the board want that comment to go to the ZBA, or you feel like it's,
I don't think so.
okay,
I think, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it sounds like you have a way to get rid of the water anyway, you got a ditch there and it's,
Mhm.
yeah.
all right, so I'm ready to make a motion, unless there's further comments. Okay, I'll make a motion, that the planning board will send the advisory notes to the ZBA as noted by the esteemed David Robbins. And is there a second?
Second.
Tim seconds, all those in favor? All those against? None? Okay, so I think that's probably all we gotta do here.
I think so, thank you.
Thank you.
I may not get it to them, but send it out till the meeting, but they'll have it for the meeting.
You mind distributing the?
That's why those are here tonight, so that everyone gets a
And
copy.
so you guys are due back April 9th?
April 9th, for site.
April what?
April 9th, for
April-
site, our site plan review application,
Oh.
which is all of this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good, see
I'm
you guys
just happy I
then.
finally saw where the elephant was. I'm looking,
And then
and
suddenly,
then halfway through Ricky's point, it's like, there's the elephant. I was like, what are you talking about?
Just reread the little print. Oh, yes.
He loves doing those so much.
Checklist.
Yeah.
you know, I'm gonna let somebody else do it tonight. Who, all right, so we're going to the David Roby, Barbara Roby lot line adjustment. They're not here tonight because of the concerns about social distancing. But we're gonna try and go through this. Just to switch off, I'm going to appoint David for this one. And you're in, of course, for Mr. Furstenberg. Who would like to do the lot line checklist tonight? Of the
I can do it
participate?
if you want.
Who, you?
Yeah, I can do it.
Fabulous.
Better when, okay, fine. Yep. Okay, the notice of list to the complete notice.
got a
list.
complete notice list,
And the name of every, professional seal is on.
Yep.
Yep, okay. Now, everybody got one of these, and I don't care. The size is good.
the size is good.
Okay, the scale is no smaller than 100.
Yep, 1 inch equals 100.
Okay, it's prepared and signed by a certified
Yep.
land surveyor. It's got complete boundaries? No.
In the inset, shows the complete boundaries.
Okay, well, but that's not complete boundaries, entire area parcel. I mean, is that okay to have just a sketch of the complete boundaries? Or do we wanna have the whole complete boundaries, or do we wanna waive the complete boundaries? I would not say that that's actually, well, I don't consider that boundaries myself. So I would be happy waiving it myself.
It's fine
Yeah,
with
it
me.
seems like
Because
we don't
you
waive it.
see the shapes fine in the sketch, so we can waive complete boundaries. Existing and proposed lot lines, angles, dimensions, lot sizes in square feet or acres and monuments of lot corners, so, well, we don't have them for everything, so we would wanna waive for the complete, we've got the
Your monuments
in
for
it-
the lots,
the
right?
annexed lot we have, and we have, this lot here, but we don't have the big lot, the lot 35, so we waived just a portion of that. So we didn't need to be
Yeah.
surveyed, so
Right,
we
sure.
waived the portion, that is remainder of lot 35. Okay, location of existing and proposed easements in areas affected by existing and proposed covenants, reservations and restrictions benefiting or burdening the property.
I got a question.
Are there any?
Yeah.
Nothing shown here,
Yeah.
but on lot 30, that
Uh-huh.
little, little area to the northwest towards Thompson,
Yep,
there is a proposed easement that's spoke to about in the deed, and it actually shows up on the tax map as being an easement.
for what?
It's a conservation easement. I can find no reference whatsoever, other than in the deed where it talks about the pins being located as per the proposed conservation easement. It doesn't say completed. I couldn't find any,
Huh.
Easement.
Well, so that's a question that maybe we need to,
There's no easement of record.
I have I could not find any record of any easement, other than where it says proposed in the deed, when I read the deed. And it does show up on the tax map, but I can't find any record whatsoever.
So it hasn't been done, and
Yeah.
the easement hasn't been complete.
so this was an easement on the Bear Hill property or the Thompson property?
On the Bear Hill property, I'll show you, if you look at my copy, that little dotted line,
Yep.
I mean, this little area right in
Mhm,
here
mhm.
is the only part of this, 0.93 acres.
Well, mentioned in deed, so have you asked David Roby about it?
I just got to this today, so I did not get a chance
Okay,
to.
so maybe we could, make that a condition that information would need to be submitted so we know whether or not it's there or not. I mean, I guess if it's not there, it's not there.
Yeah, if it hasn't been done, I mean, if it's not completed,
Yeah,
then.
but did you check the registry?
I did not check, I don't have access to the registry, so.
Anybody check Google Maps to see whether there's something different there, like a clearing or?
I didn't look at the aerial, no. Like I said, the only reference I found to it was in the deed and in the, it showed up on the tax map, but that,
Okay, so it seems like we can hold that, we need more information to determine what we want. Okay, location of existing and proposed utilities, wells, septic systems, buildings, drives, parking areas, stormwater drainage lines, drainage structures, and drainage ways.
yeah, they're both empty lots.
So 35 and 30 are both empty?
Yep.
Okay, so that is a yes, because there's nothing. Location of zoning district boundaries and area of each lot in each district.
If you look at the notes,
Yep,
it does have all that information.
yep. Name and address of each abutter and fee or an easement, and name and address of any professional helping with the plan. I think we,
Yep.
yeah. we did that.
I will just say there are a couple of discrepancies in the ownership. Where you look at,
What's shown on the map or with existing owners or
well, it's probably splitting hairs, but if you look at lot 6 and lot 5,
Yep,
on the abutter list, lot 5, it says David Roby the second
right.
instead of
Yep.
Junior,
Yep,
and lot 6 is Roby Junior. When you look at the deeds for those two lots,
Right.
that's the way it's written in the deeds.
as
So-
shown on the abutter list.
The abutter list is correct, it's the lot 5,
Yeah, so I think that should be changed to, I mean, the Kristen should be, it's not just Roby Junior. I think that's an error.
so add,
So it should just be like D and C Roby, you know, or I guess they.
Do we know that?
Well, he's got it up here.
yeah, the deed says, the deed agrees with, and the tax card agrees with what's on the abutter list.
Okay.
so
So
we can
that just,
have-
that label gets changed.
The Roby, because, you know, the other thing, you know, Thompson is held by two people,
So it's
ex-husband,
Thompson
ex-wife.
and-
And so I don't think the issue is with the, just having the last name, it's just the junior versus the second.
Right.
I think it should be consistent with what's,
Okay. Whatever you think it should be, but it should be it should be comparable to the abutter,
Yeah.
whatever the owners are, okay?
Right.
So within 60 days, we'll get 2 paper copies and a Mylar. So did they give us the Mylars yet?
no.
Okay,
And there
so-
other changes I wanna go over just
Okay.
to,
Okay, so title matter, write a copy of most recent deed to the property
yes,
for both of them.
yes.
Okay, all present proposed easements, covenants, reservations, or restrictions benefiting or hurting the property not on file with the town, the location of all areas affected or to be affected thereby shall be clearly identified by appropriate reference to the site survey.
And that's where I need to
Okay,
dig more into the, whether that really is an easement or.
yep,
What if
okay.
what if it's a deed restriction?
No, it specifically is proposed easement. And I think there was a proposed easement and, the pins were set on that easement. And so the deeds is referencing those pin locations in the proposed easement, but there is no easement is what I suspect is going on, but,
So nobody holds it, in other words.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the deed restriction
Yep.
language, it's here, but it needs to go into deed.
Yep.
Into the deed. Okay, dimensional conformance, you must prove that you are not making any non-conforming lot, non-conforming, or any non-conforming lot less conforming.
And it shows in the notes and in the calculations on each lot, what remains and what, you know, the new areas.
Okay, so my question was on this lot 35, if you started to look at the conservation overlay districts, would that still be the case that we have at least 5 acres on that lot? Since we're taking away, and that one's being taken away from, I can see the frontage and acreage on the surface is okay, but,
Well, there's 13 acres left, right?
well,
Right.
but not every lot has 5 acres of good land left to it,
Oh, I see.
as we might all have come to find. So, and then the question is this the freebie lot? Is this a freebie,
Oh, because of the,
because it's, he
prior
hasn't,
to.
he hasn't changed this, so is this the freebie?
I think it would be yes.
So can we put a note that this is considered to be the freebie?
Sure.
Okay, so we can say yes if this is
It's a
freebie
freebie.
lot, okay? Otherwise, you know, I don't know. And then, it says we may waive the requirement of a full perimeter survey, which we've just already done. So yes, we've done that. So that is all we have, except we're waiving complete boundaries of an area, well, we're waiving the complete boundary part of, the lot 35. And then we unknown about if there's actually an easement there, and then we're assuming this is the freebie lot, so that's where we are.
Okay, so.
So I'll
and-
make a motion that the
Oh,
application's
okay.
complete.
Just before we go to that, did we cover the mix-ups in the lot?
I have not yet, I don't know if you wanted to say the application's complete, and then
And then
we
do
can
that?
go
Yeah.
through it, I can
Okay.
tell you all
Yeah.
the
Okay, so you-
corrections I think
all
that
right,
need
so
to be
you're
made.
making a motion, I will second it. All those in favor? Or, so you're voting on this, okay. So all those
Oh, so I'm
opposed?
not voting this time?
Yeah, yes, we switched off.
Okay.
5-0, okay, no
For
opposed.
complete application.
The application is deemed complete.
With the waiver.
Yeah, as
Waiver for the-
shown on the lot. Adjust, the lot line adjustment checklist with the waiver. Yeah.
22nd description of freebie lot.
Go ahead, Vicky.
So, we have in the zoning, the ability of existing lots of record at the time that the zoning ordinance was adopted, the ability to create one lot without regard to the conservation overlay districts.
You can subdivide it once.
Right.
Without that. Yeah.
Without, so, and once you do that, then the remaining lot, you have to go, that's still in the zoning, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so, that, and
You
that.
just point to it, David, on the street, I just need
Just
a,
read the
Yeah.
definition of
Yeah.
lot, right?
And that presumes then that there have been no other boundary adjustments to lot 35, is that correct?
I could not find any.
Okay, so that's been as it was when we adopted zoning,
good, thank you.
okay? And then I had another, like, can we talk about
Sure,
this?
yeah.
So,
Just before you do that,
Okay.
let's just remember to go over those misidentified line numbers.
Yep.
All right, go ahead.
so my question is like, the whole concept of annexing a property across a road, what's with that? I mean, so I have a really hard time with that because I can foresee that some owner could come ahead and go to the zoning board and go, geez Louise, I've got this 2-acre lot that's just sitting there and I really, it's divided by 2 roads, it's really not part of this lot at all. So I wanna use this for development purposes. So I would feel a whole lot more comfortable if this was actually a 5-acre lot, which would be conforming in lot size to our zoning.
But don't we have a note that goes with this? It says that it is considered
It's
one.
considered deemed, but it's
Yeah, part and
deemed
parcel.
part and parcel with something across a public right of way.
Yeah,
The
but-
zoning does allow for lots to cross roads.
Yeah, because the road.
I mean, if it's
doesn't
part and
divide
parcel,
it.
on what basis could it be subdivided?
Because it's common sense that when a road divides the thing, it's kind of separate. That's why. So for me, I would feel a lot better if this was a 5-acre lot, so at least it was the minimum lot size in case that happens. Or that this would be having some development rights taken away from it so that it could never be, and then nobody would make that argument to try to separate these. So I'm just, being super paranoid and critical, but I don't get why this is 2.11 acres.
But this is in the rural districts, could you have a 2-acre lot?
No, no.
No,
Yeah.
no.
You
Two
need a
point
5-acre
one one
lot.
brings the total of lot 30 up to 10 acres even.
Oh, really? So is that gonna be acceptable? This is not conserved, so is this really acceptable to get it into current use?
Well, yes, well.
Well, is it?
As long as the owner owns adjacent lots that are in current use, then yes.
So is this in current use?
I don't know, I did not check the current use status of it,
Yeah.
but
Well, that bothers me. So.
I understand, I
so-
do know that the zoning does allow for
Right.
lots to,
Well, would the owner put or take away the development rights here, so I wouldn't have my concern about a future?
so we would have to ask.
Right, well, that's kinda how I feel about it, and I, hate to be harsh, but, it's like, really?
So Vicky, just so I understand, you're saying
Yeah.
that somebody in the future could take this 2.1 acre lot and make it,
The future owner of these two lots could say, go to the zoning board and go,
Right.
geez Louise, I mean, this thing is, divided all on its own by these two roads.
Right.
And, give me a break, just because it isn't acreage compliant. I want to, use this for development purposes, we have a housing shortage here.
even though it's not 5 acres.
Yes, yeah.
I
If this
don't
was
know.
5 acres, then, I would not worry so much. And 5 acres, and we knew that it could have a septic system on it, it's got plenty of frontage.
Right.
But,
Right.
I don't know if this is all wetland or what it
So
is.
maybe I'm a little confused, but
Yeah.
I thought we had the disclaimer, does that affect lot line adjustments, that these are deemed one?
Yeah,
It says it right here.
Right here, and it would go into the
Yeah.
deed saying it is
Okay,
one.
But I'm
Eventually
talking
accepted
about
the
the new owner, or some new owner, going to the zoning board and go, woe is me. I've got this thing here, I can't manage it as part of my woodlot over here.
But that,
It wouldn't be a
But-
5 acre lot.
it's
I
not, it's not
understand.
subdividable. Let's just read this. The grantees, by virtue of acceptance of this deed,
Yeah.
agrees that the premises hereby conveyed shall not be regarded as merged into and made an integral part of the
Yeah, I
contiguous-
know, that's for the split second that it is actually a separate deed, then it automatically goes into this, that's all it's protecting, it's not protecting this from ever
So-
going, woe is
Okay.
me to the zoning board
So,
and having that.
supposing, let's just go through this, so
Mhm.
supposing this is my land, I go to the zoning
Mhm,
board
mhm.
20
Right.
years from now,
Yeah, and I've got all this one lot, it's 10 acres, but it's divided by a road.
and I say, give me a break, I wanna,
Yeah,
on what basis?
on what basis? It's because it makes no sense to have this 2 acres hanging out there. I can't manage it as part of my woodlot, there's a town road that divides it.
Yeah, I have had this issue come to the zoning board in the past.
And what's happened?
They have refused to do anything about it. They said, by the fact that you had this language in your deed,
Mhm.
you knew ahead of time that you were doing,
But was that the case that it was across the street?
yes, it was across the street. It's Tim Fisher's property up on Whipple Hill.
Okay.
I think by making it 5 acres, you actually make it more likely.
Yeah, that's what
that
I
it
was
would
thinking.
That it would get
Well, I'd be
a house
happier
built
with,
on it.
with a, at least
Developable.
zoning compliant house lot rather than they're gonna have a hard time here with setbacks. I mean, they've got a very small building envelope because you've got two fronts there, that you'd have to be set back from. But this only talks really about the fact that for the split second that this is separated from here and before it actually, goes into the ownership here, this is a separate lot, that's all that governs. It doesn't govern forever. It's not meant to, it doesn't say anything about perpetuity or
Well,
anything
hold
like
on,
that.
is that true?
That's true, because that's not what it's supposed to be.
So
So
this
the same shall hereafter be one.
combined single lot of record.
Hereafter, it doesn't say temporarily.
Well, that's not a I mean, if that's the same language that we would do here, if, say, Jenks wanted a little more frontage and they annexed here, that would not be something that wouldn't be reversible. This is reversible language, but if everybody else thinks I'm full of it, then, I'm happy to be in the minority, but I do wanna bring that up because I think that this is,
So we can create a lot in the rural district less than 5 acres?
No.
Well, then how are we gonna do it? It's only 2
this would be a
acres.
variance, and they'd have to go to the zoning board of adjustment.
Even how do you get a variance if
You can't get a
it's
variance
5
on
acres?
that.
If it's 5 acre lots, how are you gonna get a?
How do they give dimensional variances for anything? I mean, for frontage, for, those things happen. Depends on who's on the zoning board.
Yeah.
So, anyway, the fact that it's going into current use, assuming that it will go into current use, even though it's, it's divided on all sides by a road, makes it so that there'd be less pressure on somebody to want to develop it, so that's good. I hope it will qualify for current use. And that you're,
What do you need to qualify? 10
10
acres?
acres.
That's it?
and the
And
board,
because the owner owns property, all to the south, they should qualify for it anyway. So I'm not quite sure why, if his intent, and again, maybe because of the naming of, on the deeds, might make it so that he can't put it in current use because it's Bear Hill, but not Roby.
Yeah. All right, well, how does the rest of the board feel about Vicky's?
Yeah, well, I guess I understand what you're saying, but to me, if we make it a 5 acre lot, it
Mhm.
encourages, I mean, it would, as we said, it would make it easier to subdivide. Whereas this way, it seems like it couldn't.
Well, at least
be
if they did, they'd hopefully have a, fair lot and,
Yeah, but if they
yeah, I mean.
didn't, hopefully they wouldn't.
Yeah,
Good.
well.
I just think your hypothetical is so low risk, especially given that it's Bear Hill Conservancy Trust. I mean, the whole purpose of this sounds like they're doing it for conservancy purposes.
Yeah, except I think,
I hope so,
I
but-
think that in terms of current ownership, we shouldn't look at this as,
There's,
we're looking, this
as
could
far
be
as the-
sold, this could be sold tomorrow, so.
as far as I know, there is no property owned by Bear Hill Conservancy Trust that is actually conserved.
Yeah,
That's my understanding too.
to that
So-
point, I don't think
It's just conservancy in name only.
Okay.
to that,
I mean, he may intend for it to be conserved under the trust. but-
whoever owns this, currently, it's not irrelevant, but it's pretty irrelevant, because we're looking at this essentially blind, because it could be flipped tomorrow.
Right.
But that aside, it does seem, I agree with you, that it just seems very low risk, given,
Well, if somebody was intentionally doing this, to develop that, or to leave that as an option for a future owner, then you're right, they wouldn't do 2.11 acres, they would do something more, so that it was more buildable and more likely to be able to say, we wanna
Mhm.
carve this off
yeah,
and turn it in.
that's,
So by leaving it at 2.1, I think you actually reduce the risk that
Okay,
would ever
so
happen.
just
And
looking
if you
at
made
it-
it 5,
The other way, so this will qualify for current use now, but because it's not conserved, a future owner could put a house here on this 2.11, right? Because it's
but if they
it's
did
just the
that,
laws of this.
wouldn't they lose the current use?
They would lose the
Yes,
current
they-
use on
Yeah.
everything,
Right.
and
Yep.
again, as you said, the footprint would be very small. I don't know about, how well the septic would be received by the state, just because of that piece is small. And so, you're basically, your abutters around it are going to be dealing with the,
Well, does this create, I mean, the state wouldn't buy this as a 10-acre lot. Do they need state subdivision approval to have this 2-acre chunk?
no, because they're annexing it to another lot. It's not, it would not be considered a separate lot by the towns of the states, even though they, I think how to describe it best, but.
No, it's not, well, whatever.
If,
Yeah.
at some point in time, if somebody tried to build there, the state may require subdivision approval by the state for it.
Mhm.
But it still wouldn't give them any rights at the town level to say, oh, the state said I can
Mhm.
subdivide this, so
Yeah,
you have to.
Yep, yep, yep. All right.
You still have to meet all the town regulations.
I'm sorry, I always see it half empty or whatever, so just bringing up
no,
my
sounds good to.
concerns.
It's good to bring it up.
Okay.
So, anybody got anything else?
I have just some
Yes.
changes, or corrections that should be, we talked about the David Roby Jr.
Yep,
versus
yep.
the second.
Yep,
The Roth lot is lot 29, not 31.
okay, yeah, good catch.
The Roby lot 35,
Yep,
on many places throughout the plan, it's 34.
what?
Right. Yeah, so the correct number is 35?
No,
No,
the
34.
correct number is 34.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh.
the 13-acre lot is lot 34.
Huh.
And you'll find that throughout the plan,
Yeah,
anytime you see
yeah.
35.
Yeah, it needs to be 34.
Yep,
Wow, that's a good catch. Oh, I see, it is lot 34 up here in note 1,
yep,
so that's the one place where it's correct.
that's the only place it's
Yeah,
correct in the
yeah,
whole.
Yep, yep.
In the inset where you have lot 36, that's
Mhm.
actually 35.
Hmm.
And I did talk to both David Roby and Pioneer Land Surveying, and they both verified that that was a mistake, and that it is in fact 35. And then the only other thing I found is the Bokerman lot, that they have is 9.1. Years ago, the town went through and merged lots for taxation purposes. And the original lot was 26, and it was merged into 9.1, which is actually across Baker Hill. The tax map currently shows this as lot 26. And I'm not sure which is the best way of showing that. If you read the tax card, or look for a tax card, you will not find one under 26. You'll only find it under 9.1. You'll find 3 cards, and on the second card, you will find a very cryptic note that says that the land of 26 is all part of 9.1 for the taxation.
That's pretty weird.
It happens quite a bit. It's very, I have an issue, and I don't know if Kevin has dealt with this yet. Landowners have the option to go back and ask the select board to unmerge those. You may not have done any of those in the last 2 years, but we've done maybe half dozen, 10 since I've been here, at splitting those back out. So I'm not sure if the board wants to see 26, which in fact is a viable lot, and all they have to do is go to the select board and ask, and it will become 26 again. Or if you want to see 9.1, because that's what shows up in the tax cards.
How how relevant is that?
I personally like 26, just because if you're looking at it on the tax map, you'll find it.
Okay.
But again, the problem is if you look at it for tax card report, you won't.
But you prefer having it?
I prefer having it there because if, there at least is a record that shows that 26 had been merged into.
What if we said AKA, you said lot 26 AKA 9.1?
I have no problem with that at all.
So then we'd have both, and we wouldn't have the, you know, it getting lost or something.
I think that's actually a much better.
Okay, so let's do 26.
Well done.
AKA 9.1. That's so funny though. Wow.
For the artist formerly known as Lyme.
Well, and we don't have
May I
to solve
enter your
the-
personal space
Yes.
briefly? So there's a house right here. Where is that house? Is that on Thompson? Or is that Roth? Here's Pico.
Yeah, I think that's
Here's
Roth.
Clent. Let me come
Roth
in
has
here.
a nice cape.
And you can see here that there's a little angle over there that looks like it might be, because this is, here's the road, that might be this piece here. And it looks like there's actually a little stream right there.
There very well may be, and like I said, I don't know, I was not able to find any reference to that easement. That's the only issue that I have, is that, and David may be able to shed some light on that also.
I was just trying to get a little better
Yeah.
context for what's going on in the area here as well, so.
So David Robbins,
Yes.
not David Van. What is your sense? Are we gonna move this forward with basically conditional approvals? Or do you have questions you wanna ask
Well,
before we?
I'll be honest with you, I think that, you know, the easement, if it ever existed, is on a very small portion, and I'm not sure that it really has any bearing on the lot line adjustment.
Right.
So having it on there, I'm not sure is going to, I don't think it's anything to hold up the lot line adjustment for.
Okay.
So could there be an easement and the town doesn't have a record of it? Or you'd have
That's
to-
very possible.
No.
Yeah.
That we ran into that with Crossroads for that outside classroom, that I went through the normal procedure of looking through the files for easements, and did not find anything, and then it came up, and I did find it eventually in the Conservation Commission's private files,
Yeah, okay.
which does not show this easement, by the way.
All right, so do we want to move this? Anybody?
Need to change it.
In my personal opinion, and it's up to the board, but I would waive the easements, because I really don't get the feeling that anything's going to come up with further digging.
Is this a big yank, like this needs to be done by April 1st so that they qualify for current use, is that
I
the,
don't know.
that's true, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's no other real issue other than the easement, is there?
And with
Changes that
having,
we made, but.
having that easement shown on the plat, I mean, that's really the
Yeah,
only requirement.
Is that, yeah, we
Is
might,
it really going to provide that much more information to the board, or make it, would it change your opinion of whether this should be approved or not? And that's your
So-
I
call.
wouldn't think so.
we can approve it so that they can qualify for current use as of April 1st. And approve it with the condition that if there is an easement, that it be shown.
That's
That's fine.
absolutely.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, it should be shown.
Yeah, I'd
It's
rather
not
do
actually
that
used.
than
Yeah.
waive,
Yeah.
waive.
Yeah, so, and it's just asking the owner, it's like, well, what's this about?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, I'm happy with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
everybody happy?
I
Or
can't
happy,
see from the, I
happy
can't see-
life?
I can't see from the satellite photo why there might be an easement there. It might have been something where they wanted to do some timber harvesting, and they got an easement to do it. It may have been something where they wanted to leave it.
It was
Leave it.
specifically a conservation easement that it was referenced
Yeah,
as.
it's a
Okay, so,
And the Bokerman lot does have an easement on it, so I don't know if there was something there that they were
the
trying to
people in
protect.
that house wanted to have it protected and were willing to pay for it or something.
But like I said, other than the one reference in the deed, and the fact that it shows up on the tax map, but the tax map sometimes are not as accurate as I would like either.
Well, you could ask the people in that house if they know about an
Well, we're saying, aren't we, that if there's an easement?
If there is one,
Yeah.
have it shown
So,
on the
yeah,
plan.
I don't think we have to
but-
chase it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
I'll leave it up to the surveyor to
Yeah.
track it down. You know, say,
Right.
it shows up in the deed, the board is
Exactly.
concerned, and please find out, and that's their,
Yeah.
All right, so are people ready to move forward, or does anybody have any comments or criticisms about anything? Everybody?
Why would the tax map show it though? That seems bizarre.
the person who used to do it was aggressive at getting things like that in.
Here's the-
And so it may have been that there was a proposed one, they decided to put it in prematurely, and then it never came to fruition.
All right, who wants to make a motion?
So can I just have one footnote, that if you find that there's not an easement, can you take it off the tax map?
Oh, I absolutely
Yeah,
will.
because
That's,
yeah, we just don't need
yeah, no,
to
that would be,
continue errors.
no, that is absolutely something I would have removed from the tax map.
Who would like to make a motion?
I would move that we accept this with the conditions.
Well, I've already accepted this complete with waivers, so it'd be like, you wanna approve it
Who don't-
Approve, I'm
with
sorry,
the
approve.
condition that if there is an easement, that it be shown on the plan.
Right.
That's the only
Yeah.
condition we have?
Well, the other changes,
Well, that they're submit a amended.
Yeah,
Mylar
and the amended,
Yeah.
with the noted changes.
Yeah. And I'm gonna just state, I think this is a bad practice, and, creating lots that are not zoning compliant and, merging them across roads, I think that's crazy. And I think it's setting the town up for a land use pattern that is inconsistent with the zoning district. So,
Okay.
and I would feel a whole lot more comfortable if this had an easement on it. So, and then the other thing is this is being approved with the understanding that this is a freebie
Yep, I have-
annexation or subdivision, and so this is no longer the lot of record that was approved at the, when zoning was approved. Right?
Yeah. Okay, a second,
I made the motion, so I can't second it.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Is that everybody? All those opposed? Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So we have, here's my, mailer. Can you read this, please?
I don't see where it says freebie.
It does not say freebie.
It's frisbee, not freebie.
It's the footnote at the bottom of the lot. Basically says the foregoing,
That's okay, I read it, I'm just
Yep.
teasing.
What section is that, Kevin?
it's the definition of lot.
Okay.
Section 2 is but section 2 is many pages.
Well, yes, I know.
And when I first heard about that, I went looking for it, and it took me forever to find, because I was really not expecting to find that in the definition of lot. I would have expected
Yeah,
it to
you
be.
usually don't regulate in the definition section, so, I mean, we need to do a kind of housekeeping in our zoning ordinance at some point. Because it's just not the appropriate location at all. But it's an old,
It's been there for.
no, I know,
Long
it's
time.
just an old,
Do you wanna keep
it used
this
to
as a
happen all
copy?
the time, shouldn't happen now.
Okay, minutes.
I'll move them.
I didn't have anything.
Anybody
I
have?
tried to print them off and my printer quit partway through. And I couldn't coax it back.
Anybody?
I do have.
Go ahead.
Yes. I note that the minutes from the 13th have been updated, thank you, David.
Yep.
And so I asked the question, should there be a notation in those minutes to say that they've been modified since they're previously updated? Or am I just being too
I mean, with this,
impulsive?
they were updated by a request of the board
Mhm.
when they were approving the minutes. So I don't see it any different than any other amendment to the minutes.
Yes, that happened in the meeting.
Yes.
Okay,
So
good,
it's-
all right, thank you. I would change in the discussion about alternate members, I would change the word appoint to designate. That's actually the term that's used in the RSA. So that Mr. Brown, as the chairman, if procedurally he should designate alternate members to sit. And then there are a couple other places where the word appoint should be designate. Just be
I
fuzzy.
have no problem.
Okay. On the next page, just before new business, the vote for those motions, the vote for those descriptions of Article 2 was a vote of 4-0. It was not unanimous.
Yes, it was unanimous.
Well, it was unanimous, but it was 4-0. I guess I'm asking that the words be 4-0.
hold on, where, and this is coming, where's the other page?
It's on the front, this is.
Oh. Um, I guess I'd like to ask you why you care.
Because that's what happened. There were 4 people present and voting on that.
So,
So you're saying there were more than 4 people in the meeting?
There were, I mean,
There were
I
4
was
people
here
that
too.
voted. Right, so 4 people voted,
Yes.
but there were more than 4 people.
are you talking about page 3?
Well, it
Top of
goes
page
back
3.
onto page 3 because that also should be changed to 4 to 0.
Well, that wasn't, because in that case, we were talking about a thing that John had written where he was referring to the original 5-0 vote.
Right.
So,
That's not
so
the
he,
same
that's a
thing.
referral to the previous 5-0 vote. So
Right.
I don't know where you're referring to having noticed that we made a 4-0 vote where it mentions that in these minutes, because I
Well,
don't
it's-
see
Well,
that being mentioned.
I think it does.
Wait, hold
So-
on, hold on.
Yes,
I
go ahead.
wanna be clear on so where does it reference the 5-0 vote?
The top of page 3.
Okay.
See, that was
Yeah,
the
that was the-
attachment that said, that where you had said the planning board,
Right.
maybe the only thing that you would say is, I would say the planning board had voted, because you're talking about it being in the past, that 5-0
Well,
had
that's-
happened, and then we approved that as an attachment.
Right.
Which was referring to the original 5-0 vote.
And you're saying the approval was for that, was 4-0.
The approval for these points, I mean, that's what it says in that sentence. The board voted to oppose the petition zoning amendment for the following reasons. And then.
No, it says the Lyme Planning Board voted 5-0 to oppose the petition zoning.
That's referring to the previous vote, which was
Yeah.
5-0.
It was 5-0.
Yes, but for the following reasons,
Yeah,
the vote for these reasons was 4-0.
No,
No, we
No,
talked
no,
about
you're
these.
you're
We-
starting
We talked about, we talked
no.
about these reasons at the
Yes.
time that we voted 5-0.
Yeah,
And then
they were
John
already-
had them in front of him, and we went through them.
We went through them.
One by one.
That's
And so
not-
that was when the vote was taken, and these were
That's
the
not
reasons.
legit.
So then, all we agreed in this meeting was to attach this with some revisions that referred to the 5-0 vote.
Exactly.
And these reasons as somewhat, just wordsmith. The reasons didn't change, the wording did.
I think,
So, that's how I recall it.
I second that, that's exactly how I remember it.
So, but you wanna, instead of saying unanimous, you wanna say 4-0.
so I would say 4-0 on, the,
How about a unanimous vote of 4?
I mean,
They can go back to see who's
Yeah, I mean,
there
what's,
and
what's,
voting.
what's the big deal?
Yeah, well, yeah,
I
it
mean,
doesn't matter either way,
unanimous,
right?
unanimous vote of
Everyone is
4-0.
voting.
mhm,
Yeah, would that be
okay.
That's fine.
unanimous vote for it?
You know, I'm not designated for this part of the meeting, so,
Well, actually, no, that's not
Okay.
the case, I don't
All right.
think.
Well, then,
Because you were here,
mhm,
you were here, so.
It has always been the board's method to, any member or
Right.
alternate who has been at a meeting to be able to
You
discuss the
participated,
minutes.
so you
it's-
have a voice.
so then, let me state my position clearly, and
Okay.
then we can vote, which is, I believe that in fact, the vote was 4-0 to come up with the wording that was released here. And
To
that-
come
that-
up with it?
To approve the wording that was here.
Okay.
It's clear in the earlier meeting, in the public hearing, the board expressed the sentiment 5-0 that not to recommend
Uh-huh.
the plan zoning amendment. That's very clear, that was a 5-0
Right.
vote. These reasons that are listed on this third page convey the sentiment of the 5-0 vote.
And of the 5 people who voted on it.
My notes say, when we were redrafting this, said, the
Yes.
planning board voted 5-0 to oppose for the following reasons. So we wrote that on there, and then we approved this, and then we voted 4-0 to approve this with the 5-0. That's what I voted on, and that's what he says he voted on.
Right,
So,
right.
so that vote was 4-0, but the attachment shouldn't say 4-0, because we voted to say 5-0. That's what we voted on.
Okay, I've said my say, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And apropos, I'm not sure that I need to have this in the minutes, but I wanna review my understanding of what happened. And the way I would say it is John indicated that he was very uncomfortable with this prospect of Rich being appointed, in part because this matter related directly to the reasons for the 5-0 vote, and Rich had not been part of that vote. John and Rich discussed this for a couple of minutes. Ultimately, Rich stated that he acceded to John's judgment and was not appointed. And I'd be pleased to have that go in the minutes, if there's no objection. Okay?
So do you want the vote changed from unanimous to?
I don't see a problem. You can say, to make everybody equally unhappy, you can say unanimous for nothing, if that's okay with everybody.
I wasn't there, so I'm
Right.
abstaining,
Is
so
it-
I realize that.
With everybody who was there,
Yeah, that's fine.
okay. And here's my language.
Also well-trained for town meeting to have our changes in writing.
It does make David's life easier.
It truly
Well,
does.
and whoever's taking the minutes.
Okay, so I'd like to move the minutes as amended by just about everybody,
I didn't.
except Vicky,
I didn't do anything.
as amended, because there was a lot of back and forth.
Yeah,
Do I hear a second?
second.
All those in favor? You need to put us, okay, all those
And
opposed?
I'm abstaining.
You're abstaining,
because I
Vicky's
wasn't
abstaining.
there.
Okay, I'd like to move on to what we're here for, in large part, which is, first of all, is this where we pick officers and stuff? Or is
Yes,
that next
no,
week?
You can do it, go another week.
Okay, all right, so let's do it next time. So, but please put that on the agenda,
Yeah.
Election of officers,
yeah,
you gonna do that?
no,
Good, then you'll be chairman.
Yeah, we can elect you in abstention,
We're gonna
that's
make you
fine.
chairman.
We're good with that.
Yeah, you don't have to.
We'll make him
do it.
secretary also, if you don't mind.
I'd like to,
Secretary, chairman,
yeah,
and
okay,
chief bottle washer.
thanks.
Mixes a good.
Okay,
Provider of
so-
beer.
Do it.
So, 2020, as you all have heard, is here. I'd really like to see us get back to the senior housing article, finish that off. As of now, you all got the NHMA.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So as of now, it's workforce if you have the senior housing incentives, it's workforce housing. I'm not sure that that's
That'll end up.
how it'll end up, but anyway, we'll deal with that once that's finalized, which I heard might be as late as May, but
I'm happy, I'm not uncomfortable with that.
I'm not uncomfortable with that either.
With that outcome, it's fine with me if
Yeah.
that happens, so.
I'm not uncomfortable.
Yeah,
But anyway, we're gonna have to see what the final wording is, and, that's pretty much done. Maybe we'll make it a few tweaks or whatever. And then you wanted to look at Lyme Center for this, for the same,
Just, yeah.
Sure, you know, I think that's
To
fine.
take a look at the build-out in the event that we can, further reinforce our villages with more density.
And the third thing we talked about, which I would like to do, is look down in the southern part of Route 10 in the commercial district about what could be done there, both with senior housing and see if we wanna do anything else there.
Okay.
Do other things like,
We'll see.
Okay.
I'm open.
Yeah, really look and see how much land is really usable there.
Right, I think that we need to do a similar build-out.
Mhm.
I mean, I thought the build-out, I know you objected to the build-out, but I mean, I thought the build-out was a good way to get a general sense and not fly blind into these areas. And I gotta say, I found it ironic that you were such a stickler about the build-out, but when it came to the petition zoning amendment, there was no build-out, and that was okay with you. So I think having a build-out is important with all its imperfections.
And you should participate so that
Mhm.
you understand the thinking. I know you miss
Mhm.
some meetings, and we all do, I miss meetings too. But, try to be trusting of the good thinking that's gone on. I mean, it's always important to challenge if it's way off, but.
would we consider hiring a consultant to do a lot of the base work again?
With what money?
I would suggest, I mean, what we,
The select board is here, we can solve that.
Oh, right.
oh yeah, they're handing it out.
Lifeguard money?
Yeah.
I've already put my,
Everybody keeps
Yeah.
going for that.
Yeah.
I've already asked for 9,000 of that, so.
Okay.
But I think the
What
build-out-
we talked about with, because we did get the Regional Planning Commission involved first and paid them $1,500.
Is
And
that
then,
worth?
huh?
Is that worth, is that?
That's not what we're talking about.
Well, yeah.
So, that's what we did, that's what we got. And then David
No,
did,
no, I think
it did,
that's
it
worth
set up
actually.
a template for us.
Right, and it got
And
us thinking
David,
about it.
David really did
Yeah,
a
no,
tremendous
you
amount of work
finished
on top of that.
Yeah.
And what, I remember the discussion that we had, I don't know whether you were here for that, was that one of the really good things we can take away from what David did based on that was we can then use that template anywhere we wanna look, rather than reinventing the wheel. So, yeah, I would say we should go with,
I have a couple more ideas on some of the other districts for trying to weed things down a little bit better. I've been playing a lot with the LiDAR data, and when you look at the subdivision regulations and the zoning, the subdivision says, a significant portion of an area, 15% or less for slope.
Mhm.
So when you start getting to some of the bigger lots further away, we can start weeding out areas of a lot by slope.
Mhm.
Because I can actually now create very accurate slope maps.
That's great.
So what looks like a 25-acre lot may actually be an 8-acre lot because of slope,
Right.
which you knew anecdotally in many cases.
Right, and I
but
have
not every single one, because nobody knows every single lot
Right, and
inside and out.
the biggest issue, and this is something to keep in mind, is, when you go back through to do maintenance on the zoning ordinance, the definition of steep slopes is very difficult to translate into a map, because it's anything that's a 20% slope over 100 feet. And so you could have a 40% slope that's 50 feet, and then have a completely flat slope that's
Right.
50 feet.
Right.
And it would be steep slopes, even though it might be very relevant to put something at the toe of that slope, or within that 50 feet, it still would be
so,
rejected because
do you have any idea of how
I
to?
wish I had a better
Yeah,
idea.
because
I have
that's a
thought
tough
about,
one.
it's a very tough one. And I think it may be something that you need to look at the specific development and look at lots that have 20% slope. It's a definition of that 100 feet. Because if you have a lot that has a certain amount of 20% slope, doing the lot reduction based on the total percentage of the 20% slope. So instead of saying 80% of anything that's over, the pieces that are over 100, maybe drop it down to 60% of all the 20%. And that's something we can calculate very easily. Is that calculation of trying to figure out what's over 100 feet.
And the LiDAR data just gives you that.
It gives you the slope. It
Right.
basically gives you
Right.
some very small polygons that are all the,
Mhm.
what the slope of each one is, and then you
Yes.
can aggregate them together and get areas of
Mhm.
a certain percentage slope. But you'll find that you may have a small 25-foot area that has 20% slope, because it just happens to be a very steep.
Right.
And
Because
maybe
it
there's a
actually
big,
is steep.
yeah, and maybe there's a big boulder there.
Right.
And so it shows up very steep. I mean, when you consider the LiDAR data, I can look at the cemetery up here and see the rows of headstones. So it's very good data to work with, but it's that figuring out the 100-foot, where that, because the areas are not perfectly straight.
Yep.
So if we begin to build that into into our plan for the year, basically your work on this, do you have time to do that?
Well, that's,
Because, I mean, that was one of our constraints last time, that you have many things to do.
I try to fit it in as best I can. That's the best I can say, because my workload varies. With town meeting extras this week, I'm buried through tomorrow, and then next week, things are gonna kind of slow down.
Well, I think
So-
we should approach it with the idea that you'll be able to do it, and if we find that you can't, we'll have to make other
Yeah,
adjustments.
Which one's more important, 2 or 3? The Lyme Center build out or the Southern Route 10 build out?
I would say, well,
I'm just asking.
I think the southern.
I would say the southern.
I would think. that-
But the Lyme build-out, I mean, the Lyme Center build-out shouldn't be too burdensome, it's a small area.
Yeah, most of them are already developed.
Right.
So it's a matter of seeing if there's additional capacity in
Right.
some of those older homes.
And the other thing to remember that the Lyme Common build-out, a lot of the data collection was done by the Regional Planning
Right.
Commission. So when you look at building footprint, you can't just go to the tax card and say, what's the building footprint? The tax card lists a lot of different parts of a building, and you have to go through those and decide what is part of the footprint and what isn't. Because you'll have the area of the first floor, the area of the basement, the area of the second, third, or third, however many floors. And so you have to,
So, do we wanna get the Regional Planning Commission to do the base work?
that might be an option. And I'm not saying, it's not difficult work, it really is,
Okay,
it just takes time to go
How
through
about
the
this?
tax cards too.
As the first phase of this on your part, why don't you, when you get an hour, kind of take an overview of this whole thing, and then report back to us what you think is the best approach.
Yeah, and the other issue also, the 2 districts that you're talking about now have far fewer lots than.
Exactly.
So, the scope of the work is a
We're
lot
not
smaller.
gonna be dealing with 130
Right,
properties.
so there's,
Yeah,
it
in
is,
the commercial district, are there any buildings at all?
well,
I mean,
What do you mean, are there any buildings?
That are not developed, no, I mean, in the commercial district, it's not developed.
Huh? I'm not following.
no, I think every lot has some development on it.
Okay, in the, down there, on
Yeah.
the southern, yeah,
Yeah.
down by,
Okay.
So John, I was just saying for prioritization, focus on the one that you think's the most important. If we happen to finish it, and there happens to be more time, do the next one. Just as far as time management goes for David, so there's not
Yeah,
so we're not doing both, is all I was suggesting.
Okay.
And I don't know which one's more
And the other question is, are you entirely interested in the western half of the, commercial district?
Am I entirely? What do you mean?
It's the Crossroads side. Do you?
Oh, you mean because it's already so built?
It's so built out?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good point. I think we, with Crossroads,
And maybe, looking at, Brett's side a little bit,
we have to look a little bit there, because there's some extra.
yeah, there's some lots that are
But,
pretty,
yeah, I think with Brett's and with Crossroads, we don't need too much.
yeah, there's not much,
information.
for Brett, for the Maxfields development,
Right.
but there's
Yeah,
there's a
there's-
chunk between the two.
And then
That's-
also, there's a property, if you go across the brook there, I think there's a piece back there as well.
But if you go on the, oh,
If you go over, there's a,
West side.
yeah,
yeah, if you go,
go
Brett,
over, there's a brook or something and.
yeah, on the other side of the brook, the lots extend beyond the
Yeah.
brook, so it's not just up to the brook, it
Right.
includes, access would not
So-
be as easy, but,
But, people are motivated.
and Brett has talked in the past about, wouldn't take much to throw up a bridge.
Right, of course. So I think that's worth looking, but yeah, that's a good point. We can eliminate those two things because they're just not, they're pretty developed.
And anything on the backside of the brook is all in conservation on those lots, so you can't,
Right, so on the east side of the road, there's a whole lot there that's, nothing is there.
right, there's a huge amount of,
That's what I was talking
Yeah,
about, there's
yeah.
a lot of land.
so I think that's where your potential is anyway,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of Brett's land.
And
Right.
that should be pretty easy to do with no buildings.
Well, there are a couple of houses, but again, yeah, it's not a,
Yeah.
it's a small,
So, I guess if I had to choose a priority, I'd probably choose the south. But, so what's everybody else's?
I agree.
I think that makes much more sense to me. That is
Yeah.
the commercial district.
Yeah,
It's,
We just need to change it, because it's not this place where there's services and walk to, the store and the library and stuff like that, so we need to,
oh, you mean,
develop it.
you mean if we were gonna move senior housing down?
Yeah, we need to develop a different
But I think there's,
profile about why we think that's a good place for more dense development.
Yeah, and I think part of that would come out of what we discover.
Yeah.
but we were talking about doing build out, not just for senior housing, but
Yeah,
houses
I
for-
think we
for-
wanna.
For
I-
other reasons.
I think we
to
wanna look at
know.
it with an open mind and see
Right.
what the data tells us.
Right.
Yeah, because a lot of people always ask about that. Where's this
Yeah.
commercial district, what can you do, and all this stuff.
I think the same, the same reasoning for why we had to build that way back when, we need to know, I mean, it's not exact, but we need to have an idea, at least an idea of what's there. All right, so are we making the south a priority? Is that,
Yeah.
seems like the consensus. All right, any more discussion on that? You gave me this last time.
Yes.
I looked at it, and you had suggested, passing it around, but since,
I mean, I could send a link to it.
yeah, I would say, given the social distancing thing, that might not be a good idea. Anyway,
Fascinating, yes,
Yeah.
good idea.
yeah. So I looked at this and I had two,
What is it?
what did you say
So,
now?
This is a brochure that describes.
Plan New Hampshire.
Plan New Hampshire's municipal technical assistance grant. They can help get some money to hire a consultant to look at housing. And help the board think about housing options, amending the ordinance to,
Well, it was more than helping, it was basically they take it over,
well,
was my reading of it. Yeah.
and so so the question is, were that to be a source of funds for getting a consultant in?
So what do you wanna have done?
Well,
So-
but before, well,
Hey, let me
Okay.
finish, let me finish,
I know
and
what
then,
they
and
are.
then,
I
Yeah.
do know what they are, I'm familiar with the program.
I know that 2 years ago, there was a very sketchy draft, very partial draft of a housing.
I wouldn't call it sketchy.
I'm sorry, it was a sketch to talk about a housing chapter. I think that subject is right. I think people in town are very interested in housing. And so it would be my advice to encourage the board to think about what should a master plan housing chapter look like? What should we talk about and all? And having some expertise to help us get language without the agony of drafting our own language.
And we'd have to send that.
For the master plan or for
Well,
the?
hold it, can I?
I'm just trying to clarify which one.
Because I've read this, and I'd like to make
Okay.
comments on my reaction.
So,
To-
I got
Okay.
two
Please.
sentences more. That I think this is important, I think this is something that the town is looking to us to do. And so, I would encourage the board to look toward a master plan chapter on housing, and then also what do we need to do to make housing better in town. I'm done.
Okay, I'd like to provide my reaction to this. I was not thrilled with, first of all, basically, my impression from reading this was you bring somebody in and they run the show.
But, excuse me, is this just for money? In other words, this gives us money and we do what we want?
No, not at all.
Because it says grant.
Yeah, no, we have to supply 25%, a 25% cash match of the requested funds. Then, Plan New Hampshire basically comes in and they,
Oh, it's
take,
okay.
it's another consultant. We just spent over a year with a consultant. We got plenty of information from them. We already did a lot of work, early work on the housing chapter. I don't wanna start from scratch with a new consultant, and it's gonna keep us from doing what we wanna do this year. So I don't like it. I think approaching housing is very important, and I wanna spend this year looking at what's available and what the data tells us. And we have a lot of feedback from the town and from the consultants that we already spent over a year with, so that's my reaction. And I'll burn this, not because of any animosity, but because my hands have been all over it, and I've wiped it on my face.
Blow on
So
it?
that-
Yeah.
I hope you didn't lick it, yes.
No, I'm gonna do that at the end.
So it sounds like Vicky's got some experience with them too.
Yeah.
So that's not applying for grant money, that's.
You have to provide 25% of.
But it's a group that you're stuck with a group, I mean, you can't hire anybody you want.
No, it's
Actually,
them.
you can't,
Right.
I mean, they have a stable of consultants that they would.
Yeah, but the
Right,
consultant pretty much sidelines the
We,
board.
you know, I don't think we're ready for that
Yeah, I
myself,
don't either.
because, I mean, I don't, we need to define better what we want, and I don't think that we have a clear path. I know that we don't want to have planned development up and down Route 10, so we get that.
Yeah, we've gotten a pretty clear message
Yeah,
about
and
that.
so, you know, okay, so, and we already did ADUs, and it's too bad we had to set aside our senior housing amendment, because you know.
Well, it's gonna come
yeah,
back now.
Yeah, yeah.
And if we do a housing chapter, we're gonna have to do questionnaires for the town. right?
No, well, we've got a lot of good information.
We just did a
from-
questionnaire for the
That's
town.
right,
Yeah, but you might.
visioning
But
stuff.
the other thing to remember with the senior housing article as it exists now, is it's a mixed-use senior housing article,
Mhm.
which means you can have regular residential and you can have business.
Yep.
So it's not, just to say it's a senior housing article
Mhm.
is accurate up to a point, but it's a senior housing mixed-use article.
Mhm.
I think we should change the
Yeah.
terminology
Yeah.
so that people understand it better.
Yeah, well, it's designed for a village, which is very appropriate to have the mixed use.
Yeah,
So, and in fact, to get more services and retail for the people who live in the village, especially the seniors, is beneficial. So I think that is
Yeah,
a very appropriate.
it's totally appropriate.
Yeah.
all right, anybody have anything else? It's getting late. Oh, so I guess I should ask you this, Kevin.
I'm with you.
It's sort of.
Well, I'm just looking at the plan, New Hampshire.
We've
Yeah.
got 13 minutes.
Anyway, with our favorite virus, the coronavirus,
Mm-hmm.
do you foresee that the committees and boards is there a chance that we'll be doing distance meeting?
Telemeetings and stuff like that. Yeah, I think there's a chance of that.
Okay.
Yeah, the school closes and stuff.
Might start, go ahead.
I think if we practice, I mean, if we are walking into a relatively clean room and we are cleaning up after ourselves with wipes, and nobody comes in here to our, you know, anyone who's sick or not feeling well, stay home, we don't want you. I mean, I don't know why we
Yeah.
can't continue to meet.
Right.
Well,
I
unless
was-
we have a lot of public.
Yeah, we can have a lot of
If we
public.
had 10 public in here, then.
Well, the public can also send their comments to David before the meeting,
Yeah, so-
if they're sick and
You just,
can't make
you just
it.
asked me if there was a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of course, the problem, Vicki, is that the incubation.
But so I think
period
there is a chance. I mean,
Okay, that's all I wanted to
so
know.
I think there's.
the other stuff
We'll
we
see
can.
how far it goes, right? If some of the bigger gatherings start closing, if you will, then there may be some aspect of it that you take all the way to the town type meetings.
Because I think the real problem is that the incubation period is 2 to 14 days, so somebody can be carrying this for 12 days and then spreading it for 12 days and not know it. And that's what's happening. I mean, that's the real problem. So, you know, we have a meeting and we've got 6 people in here and 2 of them, you know, have it, and it's like, you know.
And we don't know.
Well, we're supposed to meet monthly, so I don't know if that is then no longer
Oh,
required.
I think we need, I mean, I really wanna work this year and not get thrown off the track. So if for any reason that happens, I still wanna be meeting 2 times a month.
Right, well, Kevin
But-
called
Well,
in.
yeah, I think, well, yeah, but all I'm gonna say is this, is that it's too early for us to really know what that chance is. But I think it's not, it could happen where we actually decide, the select board meets and says, okay, school's done this, other businesses are doing that. What are the critical things that have to occur in this office, the town office, for example? And go through that exercise of trying to identify what's critical and decide whether or not we should actually keep running certain meetings. So,
Yeah, 'cause-
and I don't know what that answer is,
Right,
right?
we won't know because now there's 6 people.
I don't wanna,
And
wait,
in 2
let's not go
weeks,
through all the numbers.
there was
but
30
it's-
people. You know what I'm just saying, if the numbers start increasing in the Upper Valley really fast, then
Well,
it's gonna be.
but that will inform.
It'll drive.
Then, well, that's what I'm saying, it'll
Be
drive it.
prepared for at least 6 months of life being highly unusual.
Right.
Which means things like working on improving zoning amendments is optional. Working on approving a new hospital, or a new bedding for something necessary.
Right.
So we may have to really triage why we meet.
Right.
And and as much as I would love to work on senior housing and stuff like that, everything I've read says that stuff is gonna be so important relative to how disrupted our lives will be by May. So imagine by May,
All the seniors will be dead anyway, so we won't need.
well,
Okay.
no, but, no, I'm
It's-
dead
they're good.
freaking serious.
Yeah, no, I know.
By May, projections that I've read that are very credible are that our hospitals will be overloaded, they will be doing triage, so that if you're in a car accident, you will be deciding whether you go into ICU or somebody who's got COVID-19. Those are the decisions that will be being made in the Upper Valley by May. Now, maybe you might wanna say that's worst case, but I would say, think about how life is gonna be different, soon.
Yeah,
Very
so
soon. We went from yesterday during the NHL game, the beginning of the NHL game, they were talking about playoffs and scoring streaks. By the end of the game, they were talking about the season being canceled, and the next morning it was canceled. So that's how fast it's
Right,
happening.
I think that's a given. My question was, how likely is, at this point, is that to happen? Anything that we're talking about that, I mean, once we move into Stephen King scenarios, obviously, our work here will not be, when the,
No,
when
we
the.
may have necessary work because something needs to be actually approved.
But
to go forward.
my point about, boy, I'd like to work and really get this
Yeah.
done, obviously goes out the window if the zombies are
Right.
walking down the street.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
I'm talking within a certain context, obviously.
Right.
You know,
But there's a lot that's happening and occurring, at the Upper Valley level, under the Lebanon, Incident Command with Mace. The coordination, we're trying to stay as best we can coordinated within the communities, so that whatever decision's made, it tends to be more, general instead of, it's difficult within Hanover because of the situation with Dartmouth and people coming and going, and with the hospital. They've got some very, very unique
Right.
challenges, if you will. But there's a tremendous amount, I mean, Margaret is probably spending at least 6 hours a day, if not more, trying to keep our understanding around it. Jeff, the same.
Cheryl's on the coronavirus executive task force at Dartmouth, so she's.
It sounded like you had a lot of.
She's getting it 24/7.
Yeah.
And then more, so it's just.
So is that where all that horrifying news is coming from?
That and other thing, I mean, it's, the scenarios that I've been reading are stuff that we need to do today will feel premature and silly. But 3 to 6 weeks from now, it may not. So that's why, and it's necessary to do it while it feels premature and silly, because that then by definition
Slows it
pushes
down.
out
Sure.
the time when you really think,
Sort of
oh
breaks-
wow,
yes.
wasn't it weird that we, why were we even meeting?
Right.
So I'm just trying to be a little bit of Chicken Little here, just to say.
Doing a good job.
Yeah, just to say that I think that, prioritizing activities, what we think is important, things are gonna be
Relative important changes
changes in a hurry.
changes quickly in life.
Yeah,
All right, well, thank you, I think.
yeah.
All right, anything else?
I have
Oh,
just plans for people to take. Take one of these, and then this came in afterwards, so you'll have to fold your own.
I always fold now.
But just to finish, just a advertisement, so the town website and the library website are really good resources. They're connected all through our whole team that's working on communication, that's feeding through them. And so those sites help you to kind of stay
So the
appraised.
if we go to the town website, there'll be something on the front page.
There is something on the front page. You
And then we
click
just-
on the news and announcements for COVID-19,
Okay.
and it brings you to the information page.
Same thing with the library.
And it has all the updates listed by date.
And Margaret's doing updates about every other day, based on what she's learning. And then the library's got that plus a little bit more on their websites.
Is there anything else that you guys are discussing about, I know that at town meeting, they're talking about videoing and stuff, but I'm wondering about trying to run a public meeting using, I know we don't have cable access, but maybe we could do some type of live stream, Zoom meeting where the public gets a code so that they can log in to watch. There's different technologies. I mean, everybody's talking about doing everything remotely, and I wonder how they're gonna have the server space
Right.
and the ability to do that. But if we get to a point where we do wanna, where by law we have to run a public meeting
Mhm.
for some reason, but we don't want the public there, or we're discouraging the public from attending,
Mhm.
then how do you do that? Do you put us in a room and have a little camera so they can watch it out in the other room?
Mhm.
Or what do we do? And I just wonder whether other small towns are thinking about how boards that must meet in public actually function.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'll have a think on that.
Okay.
Because I think it fits very well for the select board, especially if we get into,
Yeah,
Right.
you know, legal and financial matters with respect to the response. But yet we can't, we gotta have the meeting, but then, so.
There are
And
ways
Zoom- yeah, I mean,
to stream it. There are
Zoom-
ways to stream stuff, but people would then have to maybe, you know, go to the town website, get the code, go over here, log in, enter the code, and then they can watch it. But at least you have the ability for the public to monitor what's happening. If they're not, if we're discouraging them from actually coming in the building. Or they don't wanna leave home. Right.
yeah, well, that technology can exist.
There were only fiber internet in this town.
Well, that's, I think, one of the hardest things for folks, you know, the people that have DSL and then have the ability to do that, great. There are,
Right.
once you start
So
getting
much.
further out.
And for so many people, once you start saying, well, you have to get a code, and you're just like, what?
But if that's the way that you meet the bare minimum of it being a public meeting, that's what I'm trying to get at, is if somebody has to go somewhere, at least you can say, there's a way to watch it, or to participate, or to ask questions.
Again, we're
It's
getting
difficult.
we're getting into a realm where the highest standard is no longer applicable. You're
Right.
just doing your best.
Oh, I know,
Yeah.
yeah,
But you give me some things to think about, thank you.
yeah.
All right,
I just had
Oh,
one
okay.
other thing, and that we are now voting to be, like, energy free in 2030, and like people were talking about land use regulations. I would like to, who sits with the energy committee and, okay, so, I mean, do they want us to start a zoning amendment that says all houses have to be situated, you know, facing south, and every house
weren't
that's
they
built?
gonna give
Yeah.
us a report at a certain point?
Yeah, so, I mean, you know, now's the time, we don't have that many subdivisions and that many houses
Mhm.
and that type of thing, but, I mean, that, we don't have a building code, so the only way we can influence that is through, you know, the zoning. If that's, you know, what we're supposed to be doing.
Okay.
And it would be nice to have their ideas as to what we should do, so that we can focus on housing and other things.
Great.
So-
Yeah, so my quick thought with that, with them, is to take, sort of based on what the town said, town meeting, build it into the, energy section of the master plan that then helps us to drive what you're talking about, was sort of what I.
Yeah, I think
that's what
that would
was-
make a lot of sense. It should go in there,
Right,
so that we're doing,
working towards.
we're working from the support of the master plan, otherwise it's just making things up.
Right, right. So just mechanically, let's just say that they create this wonderful document for what they see for the next 50 years with what they were intended for what got voted on. And they put together the energy section of the master plan. How does that go through, what's the vetting process then?
You mean to go into the master plan, they would send it to us and we would translate it basically into,
Planning,
Um,
planning, zoning.
Well, no, we first have to have a hearing on it.
Yeah.
You know, we have to say, oh yeah, this is our energy chapter, we have a hearing on it,
Mhm.
listen,
but
and
we'd,
then we adopt
we'd,
it.
we'd have to translate what they,
What
yeah,
they-
I mean, they,
Well,
they,
if they, you know, I would say, look at the current energy
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
chapter, and.
we have recommendations at the end.
Right, so if they
Modify that.
modify one, or write one that fits the same format, the board could adopt that
Right.
as a new master
So-
plan energy chapter.
So that, yeah, I think that's a good idea, is for them to work from the existing format.
Mhm.
And what I would also suggest is, you know, come up with what they think is a good chapter, and then bring it to the board prior, get some feedback, see what the board thinks, and then,
Well, they don't hold the public hearing, we hold.
right, but I'm saying, get feedback from the board,
Yes.
and then.
Yeah.
It's sort of a
whenever-
looping, snaking
Yeah.
back and forth.
Ideally, they would come with their draft, and we could talk with each other,
Mhm.
and then there would be a finalized draft, and, you know, we'd eventually get it ready for the public,
Mhm. Okay, good, I got it now.
who can't come.
Right. Got it. Okay.
And I think everything out on the web, they're all PDFs, but I do have all the chapters in Word documents, so I can give you an electronic copy that they can.
Now,
muck
I don't
around with.
remember there was anything really explicit, it was a lot about national energy and where the state gets all of its
Right,
energy, and
it-
there's not a whole lot for like Lyme. So I would like to see it actually reversely written into, okay, here's a bunch of old houses here in Lyme, and some new houses, but not many have been actually constructed with a whole lot of attention to energy. So how do we address this as a community? And if it's, doing, solarize every year till, the cows come home and, whatever it is. But, some really practical things that don't necessarily talk about national energy policy, but what we should be doing.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely the way it should be looked at, because I know they were talking about also, not only just solar, but other projects.
Weatherization.
Weatherization and
Well, transportation's huge too.
and transportation. If you look at King Arthur Flower, if you go to their store, they have charging stations for electric cars that are
Yeah.
solar. Down to that level, can you put those in the municipal lots so that, somebody can plug it in and have it their car charged while they're
Right.
commuting? I mean, that type of thing, I think would be, down to that level would be very important for Lyme.
Yeah,
Well, I think also something like, well, what if everybody, on my block had an electric vehicle and, could we actually power them
Mhm.
all?
Mhm.
If everybody had to plug in at once, do we have adequate utility lines? And I don't know that at all.
And, I also, my biggest issue with electric cars is that where's that power coming from? If
Sure.
it's coal burning plants, is it really that much?
Right.
I think
So-
it might be beneficial to get, Mark and, maybe Jim Norris to come and just listen and just talk a little bit.
that would be great.
Just to
Absolutely.
start, and then I'll kind of give them some ideas of how to sort of start the redraft,
Mhm.
so.
Okay. So, are we ready? Does
But
everybody
I'd like
have
to
enough?
also do the energy, if we can, to be responsible and get, that going, because
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
only 10
Time,
years to 2030, and we're like a really long way away from.
the faster we can do stuff, the better.
Okay, that's all.
All right,
No, it's good.
great job, everybody.
Would anyone like a wipe?
Yes.
Well, I'd like to put on my jacket and then I'll wipe up my spot.